I never imagined that my daughter-in-law, Chelsea, was capable of being so ungrateful, treating me like the maid. The silence in the kitchen of my own house was broken with the Chelsea's sharp voice say. Chelsea had no idea that, while I was holding the boiling kettle, the decision that would change everything was being made, and that the mortgage keys she had been waiting for would be delivered, yes, but not in the way she expected. My name is Martha Harrison, and in my 63 years of life, I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the venom that dripped from my daughter-in-law, Chelsea. I'd always believed that a mother's love was a shield, a protective force, but my dedication to James and his family was twisted, used against me, to the point of reducing me to something less than a person, a mere servant. The house I call mine, in Willow Creek, Ohio, was built with Henry's and my sweat and dreams. Every corner, every memory, was a piece of our lives. When my son James married Chelsea, I welcomed them with open arms. I offered them a place to stay, rent-free, with no charges, while they saved money for their own home. I cooked for them, took care of the house, and looked after my granddaughter, Lily, because that's what a mother and grandmother does. It was love. It was help. But in Chelsea's eyes, every dish I washed, every load of laundry I folded, every story I told little Lily was not an act of affection, but an obligation. The small comments began, subtle, almost like jokes. Martha, have you seen the dishes? Or, the pantry's a little bare, don't you think? I ignored, or pretended to ignore, the tone. After all, they were young, perhaps unaware of the effort I was making. But the pressure grew, and my role as mother and grandmother slowly transformed into that of an unpaid service provider. I found myself waking up earlier, going to bed later, always trying to please, always seeking that recognition, that familiar warmth I'd missed so much since Henry left. Things reached an unbearable point when James, my own son, started agreeing with Chelsea. His eyes, which had once looked at me with such affection, now shifted away when his wife scolded him for not doing something right. I felt my dignity slipping through my fingers, but I kept going because it was my home, it was my son's family, and I still believed that love would prevail, until that day. The kettle whistled loudly, and I turned back to the counter, my hands busy. Then, from behind me, came Chelsea's voice, cold and emotionless. Martha, remember that you're here to help. You are, after all, our employee. The sting of those words was no less than physical pain. The steam from the kettle burned my hand, but the flame in my heart was much stronger. In that instant, something inside me shattered, but something far more powerful was born from its ashes. This woman, whom James and Chelsea had seen as a nuisance, a servant, was about to show them who truly owned the place, and who, in fact, held the keys to everything. To understand the weight of that moment and the path that led me there, we must look back at my life before this bitter turn. My life was a portrait of hard work and quiet love. For over 40 years, I lived to build a home, care for my family, and fulfill every dream within the walls of that house in Willow Creek. It wasn't just a house, it was the heart of our family, full of love and laughter. My late husband Henry and I used all our money and all our strength to make that property our safe haven, a place where the smell of apple pie filled the kitchen on Sundays. I remember well the afternoons we painted the rooms together, thinking about our children's future with the certainty that we were building something strong and lasting, a true legacy of love. After Henry left too soon, the house became not only a home, but a sacred place for my memories, a clear connection to the love we shared. Every object, every old photo held a special meaning. I continued to tend the garden with great care, pruning the roses he loved so much and watering the flowers he planted for me on our anniversary. These small gestures were my way of keeping his memory alive, of feeling his presence. Every piece of that place told a story, and I clung to it with the strength of someone who doesn't want to lose what's left of a lifetime. I saw my role as the guardian of those memories, the older mother who kept the family flame alive, despite the pain of loss and the void his absence left. It was in this environment of calm and memories that James grew up, witnessing my endless love and tireless dedication. He was my only son, and I loved him with the intensity only a mother can feel, putting his dreams and desires above my own, often without a thought for myself. I remember when he married Chelsea, a beautiful woman with strong ideas. I welcomed them with open arms, full of joy, and to help them get started in life, I offered to let them live in my house, rent-free, free of charge, while they saved money to have their own home. To me, it was the right thing to do, a loving gesture from a mother and grandmother. At first, everything seemed fine. I enjoyed having a full house again, hearing young voices, and having my family nearby. I cooked for them, took care of the house, and took care of little Lily, my granddaughter, with great pleasure. I believed this help would bring our family closer together, strengthening our bonds. I saw the house as a safe haven for them to start, a place where they could grow without the pressure of rent and bills. It was an act of pure love, an extension of my desire to see my son happy and his new family well established. I hoped this generosity would be reciprocated with respect and affection, but that hope, I would discover, would be one of the greatest false promises. But over time, this joy gave way to a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, like a small shadow growing. Chelsea's requests for help became more frequent, and my chores, once acts of affection, became expected routines. I found myself, day after day, taking on more household responsibilities. Cleaning, cooking meals, caring for Lily. Everything that had once been voluntary now felt like a duty. Gradually, my role as loving mother and grandmother faded, slowly transforming into that of a provider of unpaid services, a presence they tolerated out of convenience, but whose emotional value was increasingly forgotten and devalued. Chelsea and James's nastiness began slowly, almost unnoticed. At first, she made small suggestions about the house, always with a forced smile. "Martha, maybe you could rearrange the pantry. It would look so much better." Or, "I think the curtains are a little worn, don't they?" I saw these as ideas, but her tone was already commanding. Soon she began to question my choices and the way I did things. The criticism became more open. She began calling my things old and my ideas outdated. "Martha, you can't keep that rug. It's so out of date," she'd say, her tone mixing false care with a contempt that was hard to ignore. She made me feel like I knew nothing, like my things and my way of life were a problem. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. The greatest humiliation came one afternoon when I received a call from the bank. They wanted to talk about a loan I had secured for James, a rather large amount. I didn't remember signing paperwork for a loan that size. When I confronted James, he became flustered and said it was a last-minute investment for his career and that he had my word that everything would work out. Chelsea's insistence that I trust him left me with a sinking feeling like I was being pushed into something dangerous. My dignity was slowly crumbling. James, my son, began to side with Chelsea in her criticisms. His eyes, which had once looked at me with such affection, now shifted when Chelsea corrected me. "Mom, Chelsea's right. You need to be more organized," he would say, always defending his wife and leaving me alone. I felt my worth diminishing every day, as if I were a burden, an old thing that was getting in the way of their lives. The house, which had been my refuge, became a battlefield, and I was the constant loser. But the final blow, the one that turned my sadness into a burning fire of anger, was when Chelsea, in an argument over the mess her daughter had made in the living room, turned to me, and her voice thick with anger and contempt, said, "Look, Martha, it's not that hard. You're the maid here, do your job." The word maid uttered like that, with James silently by my side, was the ultimate humiliation. It was the moment the line was crossed. That was the precise turning point, where the pain transformed into a firm decision. I couldn't take it anymore. That woman, whom James had brought into my home, had just lit the flame of my own revolution. The clanking sound of the kettle hitting the counter after Chelsea's cruel words was dull, almost unheard, but the impact inside me was deafening. "You are, after all, our employee." That phrase hung in the air, thick and poisonous, and it cut through me, deeper than any knife. I stood there, steam from the kettle burning my hand, but the pain in my heart was far worse. James, my son, who stood silently by, watching his wife tear me down, just sealed my fate. His quietness was louder than any shout, a clear sign of his agreement. I managed to turn my back, my movements stiff, feeling like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. I walked out of that kitchen, leaving the untouched food on the stove, leaving behind the pieces of my broken heart scattered on the floor. I just needed to be alone. I stumbled into my bedroom, the one I had decorated with Henry, the one that used to be a safe haven. Now, it felt like a cage. The door clicked shut, not softly, but with a finality that echoed the end of something precious. I sank onto the bed, the embroidered quilt Henry's mother had made feeling cold beneath my trembling hands. The despair that hit me was like a physical wave, knocking the air out of my lungs. How could this be happening? How could my son, the boy I raised, let his wife treat me like this? How could he treat me like this? The shame burned, deep and hot, staining every part of my soul. I wasn't just sad, I was furious. This wasn't just an insult, it was a total breakdown, the final crack in a long line of broken promises and unspoken hurts. In the darkness of my room, with only the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains, memories started to flood my mind, sharp and clear. Not just the last insult, but all of them. The opportunities James spoke of, the large sums of money I gave him from Henry's savings, money I believed would secure my future and his. The way he'd subtly hint that my home was too much for me, suggesting I simplify my life. The papers I signed without fully reading, trusting him blindly, believing he had my best interests at heart. I remembered his quick, dismissive hugs, his eyes avoiding mine when I asked too many questions. Each memory was a piece of a puzzle I had refused to see, blinded by my deep love. Now, the picture was painfully clear. I wasn't just an inconvenience to them. I was an obstacle, a resource to be used, and now, a problem to be removed. My own son had slowly, carefully, been preparing to push me out. The thought made my stomach churn. I felt foolish, weak, a victim of my own kindness. But then a different kind of anger started to simmer beneath the surface, a cold, hard ember that threatened to ignite into an inferno. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Henry, our dreams, our legacy. This house was our life's work, a testament to our love and sacrifice. James and Chelsea were defiling it, turning it into a stage for their own selfish desires. The injustice was too great to bear in silence. Henry always told me, "Martha, you're tougher than you look. Don't let anyone walk all over you." His words from years ago echoed in my mind now, a powerful reminder of the strength he always saw in me. That night, lying wide awake, I didn't cry tears of sadness anymore. My tears were hot, angry, fueled by a fierce determination. I felt utterly alone, but also, for the first time in a long time, free. Free from the need to please, free from the heavy weight of their expectations, free from the blind love that had made me so vulnerable. The decision formed slowly, then quickly solidified in my mind, hard and clear like a diamond. I would not let them win. I would fight back. This nursing home they were sending me to, it wouldn't be my end. It would be my starting line. I would reclaim my dignity, my home, and my life. James and Chelsea had made their biggest mistake by underestimating me. The night stretched long, but it wasn't spent in despair. My mind, usually focused on menus and laundry, now worked like a sharp machine, recalling details. I mentally sifted through years of conversations, trying to piece together every time James had asked for money. Every document he had hurried me to sign. I remembered the dates of his investment opportunities, the amounts, his urgent tone, Chelsea's encouraging nods. Each memory was a small, burning coal I collected for my fire. How did he manage the mortgage payments? Was he even making them? I suddenly doubted everything. The large loan from the bank, the one I didn't remember signing for, came back to me. How did he get my name on it? Had he forged my signature or manipulated me into signing something I didn't understand? The thought was terrifying, but it also gave me a direction. I needed proof. My anger wasn't just for myself. It was a fierce protection of Henry's memory. This house, our sanctuary, was more than just property. It was a symbol of our shared life, our hard work, our love. James's actions were a betrayal of their legacy, not just mine. He was disrespecting everything his father stood for, everything we built together. This fight was for Henry too, for his quiet strength, for the values we instilled in our son, which he had clearly forgotten. The idea that James and Chelsea might sell it, change it, erase our history was unbearable. I had to defend it. I might be an old woman, but I wasn't stupid. I had managed a household, raised a child, balanced budgets, and dealt with life's curveballs for decades. My life skills, my common sense, my resilience began to surface from under the layers of hurt. I started to think about the practical side. Where would the documents be? The deed to the house? My will? Had James managed to change them? A flicker of hope ignited as I remembered a small, secret safe Henry and I had built years ago, hidden behind a loose floorboard in our old bedroom, under a heavy Persian rug. We never told James about it. It held our most important papers, the very foundation of our ownership. That safe, I realized, was my key. The persona of the helpless old woman vanished, replaced by a resolve as solid as the oak trees outside. I closed my eyes, picturing myself walking through the house, past James and Chelsea, with a newfound strength. The thought of their shocked faces, their downfall, wasn't about sweet revenge, but about justice. It was about righting a terrible wrong. The fight would be long and hard, I knew that. I was an old woman, trapped in an unfamiliar place with limited resources. But the fire was lit. There was no turning back. I had to do this for myself, for Henry, for every mother who had ever been wronged. The keys to the mortgage, the keys to my house, would soon be back in my hands. That woman, who they dismissed as a mere employee, was about to show them the true power of a mother's will. The cold silence of Harmony House, instead of making me shrink, became a fire for my mind. It worked with a clear strength I hadn't felt in many years. The first days there were all about watching and listening. I wasn't just looking at the boring hallways. I was studying how everything worked, looking for small cracks where information could sneak out. I carefully noted staff schedules, visiting hours, and the general flow of daily life. I felt like a general in a new war, checking the land, the tools I had, and the ways I could get out. James putting me here, instead of breaking me, had woken up a sharp cleverness inside me. It was a skill that my busy life as a mother had made dull, but it was never truly gone. My mind, which used to think about meals and laundry, was now a sharp tool of planning, ready for battle. My first smart move was quiet, hidden behind the look of a new resident who was just curious. I started talking to the nurses and other staff. I didn't complain about my sad situation. Instead, I asked simple, innocent questions about the rules, how papers were handled, and how they talked to the outside world. I needed someone to help me, someone with a good heart who wouldn't guess what I was really planning. That's how I met Megan, a young nurse with kind eyes and a real smile. She seemed to carry a lot of worries, but she also showed a rare kindness. She didn't talk much, but she listened carefully. I felt like she was a person who could see beyond what was on the surface, someone I could trust with my secret. Megan, little by little, became my accidental confidant. I didn't tell her James's whole story right away. Instead, I shared how I felt misunderstood, how I had lost control over important parts of my life. I spoke generally about family problems, about wanting to get back in touch with my past. I praised her hard work, her care for everyone. Then, in a moment that seemed like weakness, I asked her for help writing a letter to an old friend, saying my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. This was a clever trick to get paper, a pen, and to see how mail was sent out and how much they checked it. I learned that Megan followed the rules strictly, but she had a soft heart. And that soft heart was the opening I needed to slowly bring her into my trust. The real big step came when I found Charles Anderson, an older man who also lived at Harmony House. Charles was 85 years old, carried a fancy silver cane, and had a sharp look in his eyes that showed he was very smart. I often saw him in the library, deep in thought with legal books. In our first talks in the garden, we'd speak about simple things like the weather or the food. Then he told me he used to be a famous judge for civil cases in California for over 30 years. He moved to Ohio after his wife passed away. My heart jumped. It felt like fate had sent me a master planner, someone full of legal wisdom right there close to me. He was a true gift from heaven. I decided it was time to show him my cards. On a rainy afternoon, when most residents were in their rooms, we sat in a quiet, empty living room. I told him my whole story, pouring out every painful detail to Charles. My endless love for James, the many loans he never paid back, the misleading papers he made me sign, and the truly awful, heart-wrenching moment he put me in this nursing home. Charles listened with the serious attention of someone hearing vital evidence. His blue eyes looked at every detail, every small part of my story, sometimes nodding, sometimes raising an eyebrow. Finally, he closed his eyes for a moment, thinking deeply. When he opened them, there was a spark of anger and a flicker of hope, a feeling that we were on the same side. "Martha," he said, his voice a bit rough but firm, "your son made a terrible mistake. He not only broke your trust, but he also broke the law. He tried to take property that was legally yours. There are many steps we can take. First, we need to find out exactly how he got control of your house. My guess is he used a power of attorney that you signed, or maybe, in a more bad way, a quitclaim deed, or some other trick to transfer the property. He might even have forged your signature on a sale document. This kind of abuse against older people is sadly common, but it's also fought hard in court. We need to check the public records in Willow Creek to see exactly what he did." At that very moment, the plan started to form, becoming a clear path forward. Charles's plan had many parts. I needed to prove that I was forced to do something, or that he used fraud. Then I remembered a small safe Henry and I had built years ago. It was hidden under a loose floorboard in my old bedroom, underneath a heavy rug. We never told James about it. It held our most important papers, the very proof of our ownership. That safe, I realized, was my key to everything. It was my most powerful weapon, the core of my comeback, the main part to expose James's lies and get back what was mine by right. The big problem now was how to get to the safe while I was stuck here, inside Harmony House. The idea of the safe and the critical papers inside filled me with a new kind of energy. But how to get the key to my house? James always kept it on his personal keyring, a habit I knew well. Charles and I carefully worked out a plan. It involved a phone call, a bit of acting, and Megan's quiet help. I would call James, with Megan present, and ask him to bring me some sentimental jewelry. He knew I kept these in a small box in my bedroom closet. This would be our clever distraction. During the call, I would casually suggest, with a hesitant, almost forgetful tone, that I had misplaced my spare house key when he brought me to the nursing home. I'd plant the idea that an extra key might still be somewhere in my room at Harmony House. The goal was to make him think about the keys, but then dismiss it, focusing on the jewelry. As expected, James, with his usual arrogance and rush, agreed to bring the jewelry. He probably thought it would be a quick, easy visit, a simple chore. On the day of the visit, with Megan discreetly watching us in my room, I asked him to help me reach a book on a high shelf. As he reached up, his attention momentarily diverted, his back partly turned. I seized that instant. With the fastest moves my aged hands could manage, I snatched his keyring from his coat pocket. In a matter of seconds, with the precision of a seasoned magician, I carefully took the key to my old house off the ring and quickly put the keyring back into his pocket, all without him noticing. James, completely unaware of my swift action, handed me the book, quickly grabbed the jewelry box, and said a hurried goodbye. He never realized the small but critically important piece he had just lost from his collection. The key was now safely in my hands, and the door to my plan, once just an idea, was now wide open. With the house key now securely in my possession, Megan and I set a precise time to go into the house. We would use Megan's day off from the nursing home and a specific time when James would be on an extended business trip out of state. I had subtly found out about his trip from him in an earlier phone call. Charles, for his part, began working tirelessly. He contacted old legal friends, researched old laws and previous court cases, and gathered every piece of legal ammunition he could find. He was carefully preparing the ground for the big legal fight that was coming soon. The tension grew with each passing day, a strong pressure that I felt deeply. But the quiet certainty that I was on the right path, now armed with new friends and solid proof, kept pushing me forward. I was no longer alone. I had a loyal nurse, a smart retired judge, and a key that meant more than just getting into a house. It meant the hope of getting my life back. The preparation was almost finished, and the clock of justice for James was about to ring. I felt a renewed strength, a quiet power growing within me, ready to face whatever came next. With the key in hand and the plan taking shape, the first part of my new job was to keep everything secret. It was like a very serious game of chess, where every move had to be carefully thought out so no one would suspect anything. My conversations with Charles, my friend and retired judge, became the highlight of my day. In the garden of Harmony House, or in quieter corners of the library, our conversations, which seemed like chats between old friends about the weather or memories of the past, were, in fact, exchanges of very important information. I recounted to him, with details that came from my memory, every time James had forced me to sign papers. I spoke of the dates, the places where he asked me to sign, his hurried manner, the amounts I had lent. Charles, in turn, with his experienced mind, analyzed every detail. He saw the weak points in each situation, drawing a map of how James had deceived me and pointing out the gaps he had left in his path. He taught me the importance of remembering and writing down everything, no matter how small, because every piece of information, he said, could be the key to winning in court. He explained to me the laws protecting the elderly, how property was transferred, and what was required to prove someone had been forced or deceived. It was as if, for the first time, I was understanding a new language, that of justice, and Charles was my patient and wise translator. While Charles's mind was working tirelessly on the legal side, meticulously building our case, my main focus was the safe. That hidden safe in my house was our hope, but the house key, and therefore access to the safe, was with James on his personal keychain. I needed someone trustworthy, someone brave, to enter the house and retrieve those vital documents without him suspecting anything. That's when Megan, the kind-hearted nurse who had already shown me her kindness and ethics, once again became the most important person in my plans. I had built a strong relationship of trust with her, not only by being kind, but also by genuinely listening to her concerns about nursing school and the financial difficulties she faced to care for her family. One day, during one of our deepest conversations, she told me how difficult it was to pay for books for the next semester, a burden that worried her deeply. That was my chance, a moment to offer help and, in return, ask for the help I so desperately needed. Delicately but firmly, I offered Megan a substantial sum of money, more than enough to cover her expenses, presenting it as a loan she could repay when her finances were more stable. She was surprised and initially refused, demonstrating her honesty, but I insisted. I explained it was a way to thank her for her kindness and to ease her burden a little, to help her achieve her dreams. "Megan," I said, looking her straight in the eye, my voice serious and full of hope, "I trust you completely. There's something very, very important in my old house that I desperately need back, and you're the only person I can trust to help me. It's not for revenge, Megan. It's for justice." Then, very carefully, I told her about the existence of the safe, exactly where it was, and the vital importance of the documents it held. At first, Megan was scared, her eyes wide, thinking of the risks, but the urgency in my voice, along with her sense of justice and my promise to take full responsibility and protect her, convinced her. She understood that it wasn't just for me, but for a certain kind of justice that needed to be served. Getting James's house key was the next crucial step. He, always in his commanding manner, kept my house key on his personal keychain. Charles and I devised a well-thought-out plan. I would call James with Megan nearby, asking him to bring me some jewelry that held special value to me. I would keep it in a small box in my bedroom closet. This would be our clever distraction. During the call, I would hint in a very light, almost oblivious way that I had lost my spare house key when he brought me to the nursing home. The idea was to plant in his mind that there might be a spare key somewhere in my room at the nursing home. The goal was to make him think about the keys for a moment, but then quickly forget about it, focusing on the jewelry task. As expected, James, with his usual arrogance and always in a hurry, agreed to bring the jewelry. He probably thought it would be a quick and easy visit, just a minor formality. On the day of the visit, with Megan discreetly keeping watch, making sure we were alone in my room, I asked James to help me reach a book on a high shelf. As he stretched his arm out, his attention focused on the book and his back slightly to me, I seized the moment. As nimbly as my old hands could manage, I grabbed the keychain from his coat pocket. In a matter of seconds, with the precision of a seasoned magician, I removed the key to my old house and quickly put the keychain back in his pocket, all without him even realizing it. James, completely oblivious, handed me the book, quickly grabbed the jewelry box, and said goodbye, oblivious to the small but crucial piece he had just lost from his plan. The key was now in my hands, safe, and the door to my plan, which had previously been just an idea, was now wide open. With the key secured, Megan and I established a precise time window for secret entry into the house. We decided to use Megan's night off and a specific time period when James would be on a long business trip out of state. I had gotten this information from him in a previous conversation, in a very subtle way. Charles, for his part, began working tirelessly. He contacted former lawyer colleagues, researched old laws and similar court cases, and gathered all the legal evidence he could. He was laying the groundwork for the rapidly approaching legal battle. The tension grew stronger every day, something I felt strongly about. But the calm certainty that I was on the right path, now with new friends and evidence no one could deny, pushed me forward. I was no longer alone. I had a loyal and courageous nurse, a clever retired judge, and, most importantly, a key that represented not only physical access to my home, but the hope of having my life back and my dignity restored. The preparation was almost complete, every detail reviewed, every step mentally rehearsed. The clock of justice for James and Chelsea was about to strike, and I was ready to listen. The night of the final plan arrived. The air was heavy, filled with a cold mist that seemed to blend with the tension in my chest. Megan, dressed in dark clothes and carrying a backpack, appeared at the nursing home with a nervous smile. The emotion was overwhelming, a mixture of fear and courage for such a young woman, and even more so for me at my age. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, making me hyper-attentive. I held her hand for a moment, feeling all my trust and gratitude transfer to her. I gave her every instruction about the house, every creak in the floor, every familiar shadow, how the alarm system worked, or how it didn't, since James rarely turned it on. It was like a seasoned guide, leading someone through a familiar but now dangerous place. The key, cold and metal in her hand, meant so much more than just opening a door. It was the promise of justice, the symbol of everything we were fighting for. As Megan slipped quietly away into the darkness, disappearing into the fog, I retreated to my room, feigning deep sleep. But sleep was far from me. My senses were heightened, straining to catch any distant noise. Every minute felt like an eternity. Every small sound a potential alarm, a sign that something had gone wrong. My thoughts raced to Megan, imagining her entering the house that had once been my safe and beloved home, each step careful in the darkness. I knew the house would be empty, as James was on his business trip, hundreds of miles away. But the fear that something might go wrong, that he might suddenly return, or that someone else might be there, was a constant, gnawing fear. I mentally recalled the exact location of the safe, beneath the loose floorboard beside the fireplace, the combination I had memorized for decades, which now felt like a sacred password to my own future. The courage of the plan was as great as the injustice I had suffered, and I was ready to risk everything because I had already lost so much. The hours dragged by, each tick of the clock heightening my anxiety, painfully thinning my patience. Finally, a soft, almost imperceptible noise in the hallway brought me back to reality. My heart leaped. It was Megan, back, her face pale and her eyes wide, revealing a mixture of fear and victory, but with a backpack that now seemed much heavier. She entered my room silently, her movements quick and still, and the wave of relief that washed over me was so great it nearly made me faint. In her hands, held respectfully, was a small, dusty, rusty metal box, the safe. My heart pounded with new strength. It was it. It was the proof we needed, the final straw in our desperate plan. Silently, with a solemn nod, Megan handed me the treasure, and I hugged her tightly, tears of gratitude streaming silently down my aging face. She had done it, against all odds. With trembling but steady hands, I opened the safe. The ancient mechanism clicked, a sound like fate itself. Inside, untouched by time and James's greed, were the documents Charles and I had so longed to find. The original deed to the house, clear and undeniable, with my name and Henry's as the sole and true owners, drawn up 50 years ago. My last will and testament, carefully written, which indeed named James as the sole heir after my death, but which also contained a very important lifetime use clause, clearly guaranteeing my right to live in the house for as long as I lived. And most importantly, a document signed by James himself years before, clearly acknowledging that the various loans I had made to him were, in fact, advances on his future inheritance, and that the use of the house was tied to my residence and my well-being in it. There was no power of attorney, no quitclaim deed, no other false paper that could prove I had transferred the property or authorized its sale. The next morning, Charles, with the calm seriousness of a general before a major battle, carefully reviewed the documents Megan had collected. His eyes, which had seen countless court battles and the complicated workings of the law, now shone with a new, strong resolve. "Martha," he said, his voice firm and clear, "you have an irrefutable case. James not only betrayed your trust, using your love and kindness, but he also brazenly attempted to take a house that legally, without a doubt, did not belong to him while you were alive. He has no right to live in the house while you are alive, much less to sell it, and his actions constitute elder abuse under the law." News of our discovery and the impending legal action spread quickly among the few staff we trusted at the nursing home, and an undeniable air of expectation and silent support hung in the air. The most important moment of this extraordinary situation arrived quickly the following week. Charles, acting with impressive speed and precision, filed an urgent and detailed petition with the court. He requested an immediate court order for James to stay away from me or the house, and also to nullify any and all attempts to sell the property. James was notified of the court summons by a stern-faced court official just as he was stepping off the plane from his business trip. He was completely taken by surprise and visibly shaken. The first hearing was scheduled for just a few days later, a rapid pace that demonstrated the seriousness of the charges. In the packed courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. James, flanked by his visibly embarrassed and agitated lawyer, tried to maintain a calm appearance, but his eyes, which had previously shone with arrogant confidence, now showed a growing, desperate panic. I, on the other hand, sitting next to Charles, felt an inner strength and calm I never imagined I had, ready to face my son and take back my life. When Charles, with an imposing presence, presented the unquestionable evidence, the original deed, my clear will, and the condemning document signed by James himself, a heavy, absolute silence fell over the courtroom. James's lawyer, desperate, tried to argue that I was old and unsure, that the signatures were old, that I was simply confused. But the judge, a man of serious and unwavering demeanor, quickly and harshly interrupted him. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, his voice cutting through the tension, looking directly at James with a look of clear disapproval. "The evidence presented is clear and undeniable. Your mother, Martha Harrison, legally and rightfully owns this property. Your attempt to remove her from her home and unlawfully take it is a blatant violation of the law and an act of unscrupulous cruelty that this court will not tolerate. The restraining order is granted. The property remains solely in the name of Martha Harrison, and any attempt to sell it is immediately nullified. Furthermore, Mrs. Harrison has the absolute right to return to her residence at any time she chooses, and you, Mr. Harrison, are strictly prohibited from approaching the property under penalty of arrest until further order of this court." The judge's gavel echoed with a loud bang in the shocked room, sealing James's sad fate and announcing my resounding victory. That powerful sound for me was not an end, but the vibrant and long-awaited beginning of a new chapter. I, Martha Harrison, was finally going home, and James, my son, was just thrown out of my life and my home. Returning home was a moment of such intense emotion that it's difficult to describe. There was a mixture of profound relief, quiet joy, and the slightly bitter memory of what I had been through. The front door, which James had once closed behind me like a prison gate, now swung wide open to welcome me back, bathed in the warm, inviting light of the morning sun. The stone path, which had seemed so far away, now led me back to my own porch, to the place where I had planted my first flowers with Henry. Every room seemed to breathe again, full of life and light, finally free from the heavy shadow of James's betrayal. The smell of home, that unique aroma of old wood, fresh coffee, and the sweet scent of garden roses filled my lungs, and I felt as if a precious piece of my soul that had been brutally ripped away was finally returning to its place. Memories of Henry, my beloved husband, echoed softly in every corner. They were no longer sad ghosts of a painful loss, but silent and proud witnesses to a victory that came with much struggle and to the enduring strength of our life together. As I walked through the rooms, each step was a small act of healing. The living room sofa, where James used to lie down to watch TV, now felt inviting again. The kitchen table, where Chelsea had called me maid, now seemed ready for new, joyful meals. The scuff marks on the walls, the scratches on the wood floor, which had once seemed like scars of pain, were now part of history, reminders that the house had weathered storms, just like me. The garden, once a refuge, was now a symbol of new beginnings. The flowers I had left, somewhat wilted, waiting for me, would now be tended with new purpose. I wasn't just returning to a place, I was returning to myself, to the Martha who had been lost under the weight of pain and ingratitude. It was as if the house, in its stillness, was saying to me, "Welcome back. We won." James, expelled from his own web of lies and greed, faced the harsh consequences of his actions in a public and painful way. News of his attempted elder fraud and abuse spread like wildfire through the community. This quickly destroyed his good image in the already highly competitive real estate market and forever tarnished his family's reputation. He lost not only his home, but also the trust of his former colleagues and clients, leaving him in a difficult situation of massive debt, professional bankruptcy, and profound social isolation. Those who had previously praised him now regarded him with suspicion and pity. His lawyer, in a last effort to reduce the damage, secured a settlement. James would have to pay me compensation for the numerous loans he had never repaid. This amount, while never truly erasing the emotional pain he had caused me, symbolized a belated and forced acknowledgement of his enormous moral and financial debt. The arrogance that once defined him was completely replaced by a visibly sad and broken expression, a clear reflection of the devastating toll his unbridled greed had taken on his life. I felt no joy in his misfortune, but rather a profound sadness at what my son had become, and a relief that justice had finally been served. My life, on the other hand, blossomed in a completely unexpected and beautiful way. Harmony House, the nursing home I had feared would be the end of me, ironically became the cradle of a new and vibrant phase of my life. I continued to visit Charles, my valued mentor and dear friend, and our friendship deepened significantly. He, in turn, found a new and important purpose in his retirement, dedicating his vast legal experience to offering free consultations to other seniors facing similar situations of exploitation and abuse by their families. Together, with the help of others in the community who were touched by our story, we began working passionately on a new community project. The goal was to educate the public about seniors' rights, how to spot financial fraud, and what crucial strategies to use to protect themselves and their loved ones from such cruel abuse. Martha Harrison's story became an example, a warning, and a source of inspiration for many. Megan, my courageous guardian angel, truly became like a daughter to me. With the money I had lent her, which she now insisted on returning in full, along with a generous additional donation from me, she was able to complete nursing school. She became a highly dedicated and admired professional, always with a watchful and compassionate eye for the most vulnerable in her care. Our weekly meetings became a ritual, sharing laughter and the challenges of our new lives. I watched her grow, not only as a nurse, but as a strong and ethical woman, and I was proud to have been a part of her development. The house, my sacred place, took on an even deeper and more important meaning. I no longer saw it simply as a mass of memories from the past, but as a living symbol of unshakable strength, enduring love, and the powerful truth that it is always possible to begin again, no matter how dark the past may seem. I began actively inviting neighbors and old friends for delicious afternoon teas, and the joyful sound of laughter once again vibrantly filled the cozy rooms. I even enthusiastically reopened the doors to the community gardening club that Henry and I so loved, transforming our beautiful garden into a vibrant space for social gatherings, shared learning, and new friendships. That house, which James had so cruelly tried to steal from me, ultimately became a shining beacon of hope and undeniable proof that life always finds a remarkable way to renew itself, even after enduring the harshest and most unexpected storms. Every flower we planted, every bench Henry and I built, now told a story of endurance and beauty, a story James would never understand. The lesson I learned from this entire extraordinary experience was profound and transformative. I discovered an inner strength and unshakable will that, honestly, I didn't even know I possessed. A fierce ability to fight for myself and my truth when all seemed utterly lost. I realized, with painful clarity, that love, even the deepest motherly love, cannot and should not be blind to the truth, and that a person's intrinsic dignity and self-respect are absolutely non-negotiable. I learned that even in what society often calls old age, life still holds incredible surprises, new purposes, and new opportunities for anyone who steadfastly refuses to give up. My story wasn't just about physically reclaiming a home. It was about triumphantly reaffirming my own existence, my undeniable voice, and my inherent worth as a human being. And by courageously sharing this profound experience, I sincerely hope that others, especially those who may feel invisible, unheard, or deeply undervalued, will find the courage within themselves to stand up and fight for what is rightfully theirs. The moral of this story is abundantly clear. Never, ever underestimate a person's profound wisdom and unbreakable resilience, especially when faced with the cruelest and most personal adversity. If you were touched by this inspiring story of overcoming challenges and seeking justice, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more narratives like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction makes all the difference.